There we go. So yeah, thank you everybody for coming today. I'm Elizabeth. I'm the Growth and Development Officer for Central Yorkshire. So I work with Central Yorkshire County to support them for growth and development of Scouting in all of the districts. And I'm here with Faye today as well, who's helping me with the tech, who's a new funded projects coordinator for the North of England. And yeah, so she's going to be looking after all the technical things today.
It's been a while, guys, so give me a bit of extra time. It might not be the smoothest transition between screens, but I will get there.
So today we're going to be talking all about activity risk assessments. So we're looking at what they are and why we do them, and then a bit about how we can do them. And then there'll be a chance to go off out into breakout rooms to have a go at writing one yourself. When we're presenting, we'd appreciate it if you could stay on mute if possible, just so it avoids any background noise coming through. But feel free to put any comments in the chat or put your hand up. We are quite a small group today, so if you have got anything to say, feel free to put your hand up, either in real life or using the Zoom hands up function, and we'll come to you. So if we can move on to the next slide, here we go. So risk assessments, they're a process or method for identifying the hazards and risk factors that have a potential to cause harm. They're about identifying who can be harmed, and then also what you can do to lessen the likelihood or impact of that potential harm. And we do this because we want to have fun, and we want our young people to have fun and do exciting things, because that's what Scouting really is all about, isn't it? But unfortunately, everything does involve the element of risk, whether it's something like crossing the road or climbing a tree, or something even really simple like doing a craft where someone could get a paper cut or something like that from. And because of this, we need to mitigate that danger without losing the excitement and adventure that we want to give our young people and ourselves in Scouts. And so we can do that by putting in suitable measures in place, for example, appropriate supervision or like training, or the correct numbers of adult ratios, things like that. And risk assessments, they're not anything new to Scouting. It's something that we've always done, and also something we do in our day-to-day life as well, every day. But often we do these kind of in a dynamic way, or like on the go, and either share them verbally or kind of keep them in our heads, but not necessarily always write them down. But now we are in a place where we do need to have recorded risk assessments for all the activities we're doing in Scouting. So this means like written down or recorded somewhere so other people can see them and access them. And you could do these at the same time as planning your programme for your sessions. That's a really good time to do them. We want them to be recorded because it means that it's really easy to share them with your other leaders, other members of your teams, any helpers you've got coming along, and also the young people that you're going to be working with. And they can still be kind of like dynamic, and they can still change and be adapted, but it also means that they're available for that future reference, and so they can be developed and kind of come towards like a pool of collective learning, so that if you've got like a place with all your risk assessments stored, that's going to benefit everybody in your group or maybe your district, not just you and your immediate team. And it also means that we have evidence. If somebody asks us, why did you do it like that, or what have you done to kind of mitigate those risks, you've got evidence to show them. And also it's just really good practice to have them written down so you can share them and with everybody that's involved in the activity. And it doesn't mean that we have to write a completely new risk assessment every time you do an activity. You can reuse and review previous risk assessments you've done, or even ones from other sections in your group, but make sure that if you are doing that, each time you are looking at it, seeing if anything's changed, maybe the age of the young people, the location of the activity, and taking those changes into account. But it doesn't need to be an onerous process of writing a completely new one from scratch every time. So if we go on from here, I'm going to talk you through like the 5 steps to risk assessment that we use in Scouts. Hopefully you'll be kind of familiar with these already, but if not, they're quite a straightforward way of breaking down what you need to do in a risk assessment, and hopefully make it quite simple for you to follow. So the first one is you need to look for the hazards. So identify anything that could be a hazard or a risk where somebody could be harmed. So that could be a hot iron, for example. And then the second step is identifying who might be harmed, and also how. And this could be the young people, but also remember it might it might be leaders, any helpers, or if you're in a public place, it could be members of the public as well. And something to remember when you're doing this section is think about the who in more detail than just the young people or something like that. Is there anybody in your section or your group that has additional needs that might need to be taken into account and might need extra support? Like, is there something you need to take advice or guidance on? So you might need to think about it in a bit more detail than just young people and leaders. The third step is, how are the risks controlled? So, like, how are we mitigating these risks to try and prevent them from causing being too dangerous? And it's not about removing the risk, because that's often not possible with wanting to do the activities you want to do, but more about controlling it and reducing it. So, for example, like if you're cooking on an open fire, there's obviously things that could go wrong there and could harm people, but we can't just take the fire away, because then you wouldn't have a fire to cook on. But you can do things such as having buckets of water available, having the correct amount of leaders there, first aiders present, making sure that long hair and neckers are out of the way, things like that. Kind of the things that you probably would do with common sense, that's all part of like mitigating the risk, and that's things you write on your risk assessments. Step 4 is recording and communicating. So this is a really, really important step, because if you could write the really, really good risk assessment, but if nobody else sees it, then you wouldn't have had any point of writing it, I suppose. It's really important to make sure you share and communicate them. So once you've written it, add the risk assessment to the program maybe, and then email it out to anyone who's going to be working with you on that program for that activity. Or you could put it in a shared folder, something like that, however you are kind of collating and curating your risk assessments in your team. And we're going to look at a bit about where people do that, or how you could do that later in the workshop today. And then finally on this section, don't forget to verbalize any key parts when you like brief the adults and young people at the start of the activity. So there might be things that need to be verbalized depending on the activity, and you want to remind them of to keep them aware of any dangers. And then finally, the 5th step is reviewing and revising your risk assessments. So as I said before, you don't need to write something completely new every single time. You can use an old one, check to see what's changed, review it. Maybe you're a Beaver leader that's adjusting a risk assessment that was used for cubs or something like that. So you've got that kind of like as an example, and then think about what might have changed for your situation and anything that you need to write down and record for that. And it's good practice to do this at least every 12 months. Well, every single time you do the activity again, but if you're only doing something once a year, it's good practice to kind of get them out every 12 months or so to review them, see if anything's changed and what needs updating. And then again, if it does get updated, don't forget to communicate that with other people in your team afterwards. So hopefully that all makes sense, and it's quite a straightforward process to follow. There's a lot more information about this on our website, which we'll be looking at a bit later. And I'll also share the link to you in the chat and in a follow-up email that you can look through, and kind of there's videos on there as well that are useful to look if you like learning through watching videos. Does anyone have any comments they'd like to make at that point, or anything they've done with risk assessments in the past that's worked quite well for them?
Elizabeth, just one thing we wanted to mention as a district is, I don't know if anyone else is using a risk assessment manager, Scouts RAM. I don't know if it's something you was mentioning later.
Yeah, you can talk about that now if you want to.
Yeah, Scouts RAM is it's a private company, a bit like OSM in that respect, which has a lot. It helps put risk assessments. It reminds you of making sure we're looking at these 5 steps. It's a really easy way to share risk assessments, to collaborate on risk assessments, and also to build up a portfolio of risks. You can see risk assessments of what people have done for activities and Scout sample ones and be able to edit them. It's about £5 for a year. I know it's something which we're looking at getting for our district as I think we can just about scrape together £5 for a rate together the bottom of the sofa. It might be the right thing for you, it might not be the right thing for you, but it's just something we wanted to recommend was Scout RAM as a risk assessment tool.
Thanks, Gareth. That'll be helpful. So yeah, Scouts RAM or RAM, isn't it? Risk Assessment Manager. Yeah. And I assume you could just put it into Google and then that'll bring you up.
Yeah, come straight into Google. They've improved it an awful lot. It was a little bit slow to start, but I think the more you use it, the more it becomes more second nature. And again, it is a really good way of just not only sharing risk assessments with leaders, but sharing risk assessments with parents and being able to make sure you send one link out. And if you update your risk assessment, parents will receive the most recent up-to-date version.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you.
There isn't a risk assessment on OSM, because when it was COVID, we did that. We did that for the district. Each person that wanted to run a meeting or to put an application in got it viewed and then returned or asking for an alteration or whatever. It's quite good.
Oh, that's good to know as well. Yeah, so you could also store your risk assessments on OSM, which is Online Scout Manager, if people haven't come across that before. Yeah. And I've just seen that John has joined us, and not to put you on the spot, but I was wondering if you had any advice for people when they go about writing their risk assessments as well. Anything further than what we've touched on there? Oh, you might need to unmute yourself if...
Thank you. It's been a busy day. Yeah, I mean, obviously, all the 5 steps are spot on. But the thing I always, or what I found when I first started doing these, was how to approach it, really. You sometimes overwhelm yourself by trying to think of too many things at one time. So I always find it's better to try and split things down. So if you're doing a particular risk assessment, then try and look at the steps that you would have in that risk assessment, and then look at the risks for each of those steps. So rather than diving straight into the risks and the control measures, look at the steps that you're going through and the things that you will do, and then look at the associated risks then. And I just find that sort of helps you keep your mind fairly clear and focused on what you're doing. And I think that step 4, record and communicate, is the most important one. And I think that one particularly needs to be doing several times, so that you share it with the team to get your first draft through, and let them have a look at it with a different pair of eyes. And that is often invaluable, to have somebody's different view on it, because it sanitizes what you're doing, but it also brings in their buy-in and their ideas of things as well. So I think those are the sort of tips that I would say when you're starting from scratch.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks, John. So if we move on to the next slide, we're going to do a bit of an activity now that covers those first couple of steps in the process, all about identifying hazards. And we're going to do this on a program called Ideas Boards, which is hopefully going to be really easy to use. So Faye's just going to pop a link into the chat, which we'd like you to click, and that should open up Ideas Boards in kind of a separate window on your computer or whatever device you're accessing on now. And we're just going to do a little activity on there. So, oh yes, it's in the chat now. So if you click the link, it should bring it through, and we'll put it on the screen as well, so you can see what everyone else is saying. And so if anyone's struggling to get on there, please let me know. And we can also use the chat as well if you can't get into it. So what we'd like you to do is just have a little think about, if we're going to do firelighting as an example of an activity, what are the hazards of firelighting, and then who could be harmed? So for this example, maybe let's say we're doing it at Bramhope with a scout troop or something, or it could be like whichever section you volunteer with. And to make a post-it note, you just click the little green plus on the screen, and it should bring up an option to make a post-it note, and you can type in there what your answers are. So yeah, just take a couple of minutes to do that, and we'll see them coming up on the screen.
Sorry, Elizabeth, did you say the link was going to be put in the chat window?
Yes, it is in there. Oh, wait, I'll...
It's in there, but I can't write on it. It won't let me write.
Oh, right, on the post-it note?
Yeah.
Can you click on the post-it note?
I have done, but all I get is a ping.
Oh yeah, the same thing is happening to me. I've never had that before in Ideas Boards, and I've used it. Oh, I'll put the link again. There we go. Oh, no, that's the wrong link. We've used Ideas Boards so many times, and I've never had that. I've never had that happen.
Oh, funny.
So if that's happening to other people, we can just use come off mute or use a chat box. That's fine. That's okay, right? That is one to watch, Faye.
Yeah.
There it goes again.
Yeah. Okay.
Same.
Let's go to plan B. We'll go back to the PowerPoint and we'll just use Zoom chat because we know that's going to work, or people can stuff. So if we start first, what are the hazards of firelighting? what could go wrong and harm someone.
Oh, it's off again.
Does anyone want to put something in the chat or say out loud? It's up to you. Oh yeah, Anne's got chopping wood. Yeah, definitely. Burns from Renelle. Yeah. Also, if people have managed to use the ideas board, okay, we'll do a bit of both. We've had debris from the fire, so in people's eyes, that's a really good one. And also, yeah, falling into the fire whilst playing near it. Yeah, definitely. So I guess there's steps we can do to mitigate that. And then risk from manufactured wood, nails, etc. Yeah, I suppose you've got the risks there of there being dirty nails, dirty metal, things like that people could get injured on. Lighting matches and paper. Yeah, definitely that's one as well. And then smoke, I see someone's put on the ideas board. Size of fire, yeah, definitely. Because presumably like the bigger the fire you have, then the more hazardous it's going to be, I suppose. So yeah, we can see what people have put on the ideas board there. And so that's an idea of some of the hazards that you might identify if you're doing your risk assessment. And then who could be harmed in that thing. So let's think we're doing it at a scout campsite with your scout troop or whichever section you volunteer with.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know what's happening there, and the same thing's happening. Oh, it's working for Faye as well. The same thing is happening to me, and I've never had that before, but it seems to be working in the chat, and some people are being able to use it, so that's okay.
Somebody's written I was going to write anyway.
Yeah, all participants. Yeah, I think this one is, potentially one of the more simple steps, because you just have to think about who's going to be there, and if there is anything that you might need to take into extra consideration, this is the space to do it here. So hopefully that's a bit of a quick exercise we've done there to help you like break down how it could look without seeing it in the risk assessment forms. I think sometimes seeing the whole form you might be filling in can be a bit overwhelming, but breaking it up into steps like this does help. Oh, animals, that's a good one. I hadn't thought of that one. So yeah, any animals that are around could be a risk or could be harmed, but I suppose could also be a risk as well to people, depending on where you are. Okay, fab. So I think you've all got it there completely. Everything that you've brought up there is exactly what we were looking for. If we can go back to the PowerPoint, please, and then we'll continue. So now to put it into a kind of risk assessment form that you might use in your like day-to-day scouting life. So this is an example one that we've taken from the Scouts website, and on that website there are loads of examples that have, like this one, that have been pre-populated and filled in to give you an idea of the type of things you might want to think about when mitigating the risks. And there's also blank templates that is like this but without being filled in, that you can download and use for yourselves. You don't have to use this template at all. Like if there's something that you and your team are working with that works for you, that's fine, as long as it follows our steps for risk assessments and it's easy for other people to understand and follow. But this is just a helpful form if it's something that you've not done before. A few things to point out about this risk assessment is that at the top you can see that the date of the assessment and the date of the review are on there, and also the name of the leader that's undertook the risk assessment. These are all really important things to fill in, because it means that if anybody who's looking at it has any questions or needs a bit of clarification about something, they know exactly who is the best person to get in touch with. And it means they also know when the date was and when it was reviewed and when it should be coming up for review as well. So that it's just all important information to make sure you and your team have on there when you're filling out your risk assessments. So hopefully you can see how this kind of fits in with the 5 steps we looked at earlier. So like the first column is about the hazards and identifying them, what those risks are, and then the second column for who's at risk, and then the third one for how you might control the risks, what extra things you might need to put in place to mitigate them. And then the final column is there for anything that might change throughout the night, throughout the session, throughout the activity, things like that. And then I suppose the only thing that isn't on here is the recording and communicating, but that comes in to like knowing who the person who did the risk assessment is, and also that will come with you sharing it after the fact. I think a good thing to remember as well for when you're in the place of the activity is that you can add to the risk assessment if something you see something and think, oh, actually I haven't thought about that, you can completely add to it, whether that's after it's taken place or kind of during it if you've got time. But also if something does change or happen that you weren't expecting, don't be afraid to change the activity or even stop it if the risk increases and you think that actually this isn't safe anymore, we need to stop it. Don't be afraid to do that if something happens. And it's worth having a plan B in place in case this happens. So if there's something you're expecting, hopefully we wouldn't be expecting it to go wrong, but if there's something that you might be a bit concerned about or you've not done before, have a plan B and make sure you communicate that to people as well, so they know if something does happen, they know how to act and what the plan B for that activity is. And so yeah, hopefully, does anybody have any questions about this template, or does anybody use this form already, or use a different type of form that really works for them and is in a different format?
I've got a different form. Mine's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns, and the hazard is listed on the left-hand side with varying levels of. It says nature of risk, who might be harmed, level of risk, high, low, medium, and the next column is action in planning, action on departure, monitoring during event, and that is for a 42-mile walk. So different parts of it it could do with modernising and could do with making it so it can be read, because this was 2017 it was last written, and I've just found 3 mistakes that nobody's said before. But there's things like coming down a hill, finding a stream across the bottom of the hill. What do you do? Things like that.
Yeah, that sounds really good. And I think that if you want to include like a level of risk, that's fine to do so. Like, we don't require it, but it's something that some people it can be useful if for people's planning.
Very useful if you're going on the hills.
Yeah. And like, but then as you just said, it is important to make sure that it's easy to read and easy to process and easy for other people to understand what you're saying. That's really important. So now we're going to go on to the next slide, and we're going to have a bit of a breakout room session now for you to go away and start putting the risk assessment together. For this session, we've decided to do just for like cooking during a section meeting. So imagine you're at a scout hut with a kitchen. Well, I suppose you could be cooking outdoors as well. You can choose where you're cooking, but just that's the activity we're going to do the risk assessment for. And we're going to what we're going to do is show you where to find the template risk assessment form on our website, and then ask you to go and download it and start filling it in the breakout room. And it's up to you whether you all want to do that or whether one person wants to download it and then share their screen and you can fill it in together. It's up to you in your room how you want to do that. But we're going to show you where to find it now and where to get to the risk assessments page on the Scouts website. Because it is a big web. There's a lot of information on our website. It's huge, and there's a lot of stuff that's worth going and looking through. But we'll show you like how to find the risk assessment page, because there's a lot of useful stuff on there. Here we go. So hopefully you can see our homepage here for the website. And to get to the risk assessments page, all you need to do is go to info for volunteers at the top, and then staying safe and safeguarding. And then this brings up this kind of whole page about safety, safeguarding, things like that, and then risk assessments there, which brings you to our page all about risk assessments. And And then the form that we're going to use for this activity is this one here at the top where it says download risk assessment form. That's the one we'd like you to go in and download if possible. So we'll put the link into the chat now for the risk assessments page. So you don't need to go through the whole process, but we just thought we'd show you how we got there, so you know. And then Faye's going to put you into breakout rooms so that you can go away, start filling that in, maybe do about 3 lines, and we'll give you about 10 minutes to do this. Does that all make sense to everybody? Yeah, okay, I see people are starting to go, so that's good. So let me just, there we go, restart the recording. How was that for everybody? How did you get on in your breakout rooms? It would be good if we could hear a little bit about what you spoke about and some of the sort of things you put onto the risk assessments, how you found the process. So does anybody from room 1 want to feedback? So that was Andy, Anne, John, Emmeline and Wendy. Anyone, any of you? Oh, Andy, you're on mute, I think, if you're trying to talk.
Is that a bit better?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Yeah, so we shared the screen and just put a few risks in. We only really focused on around the equipment and burns and scalds, and then a bit about actually finishing the activity of how you switch it off and disconnect the burners correctly, because we were cooking outside on gas burners, and sometimes the risk assessments don't. They sort of run the activity, but then don't think about the clearing away safely and everything else. So we talked about who the people was involved. We picked some controls up, but obviously we didn't have time to put all the controls. So then we started talking about, well, based on what we wrote, what else would we do on the post review? So we didn't have time to write in inclusion of an exclusion zone or area, a safe area. So we added that into our controls, what has changed and what could be done. And then we also just very briefly just touched on not leaving a box blank on the review. So when you do it, if nothing's changed, actually say that will be reviewed on this day and the controls are still effective. So then when you view it, it's like you haven't just ignored a box, you actually know you've gone through the thought process.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think that all sounds completely right. And I think that point about doing the end of the activity is a really good one, because I think it's an easy one to forget, is if there's something that's going to need packing away and that could be dangerous, that's definitely something to be including in your risk assessments as well. And I suppose kind of ties into what John was saying earlier about when you're thinking about the steps of the activity, that's part of that activity, isn't it, I suppose? And yeah, definitely something to include. Thank you, Andy, for sharing that. Anybody else from room 2, the other room, have you got anything you'd like to add to that, or do you want to share a bit about what you spoke about?
Yeah, we had a fairly similar situation. I think it demonstrated the benefit of actually talking about risk assessment as you're doing it, and actually we all had slightly different ideas. We all was able to put in new things and just tighten things. With very similar risks, we looked at food poisoning first and came up with some of that. What our controls would be there. We talked a bit about what are the washing requirements. We had a bit of a chat about what level of competence would we expect it to be, and would what we would ask change depending if it was adults or young people, or the size of the catering was doing. We had an interesting chat when we came to burns and was looking at our control measures, and we talked about whether we would put the fact that we have a first aider on the risk assessment, because it's something we have to do anyway in scouting as a first aider, so is it an actual control we're making. And we talked about the fact that a risk assessment isn't just for us, it's for anyone who wants to see it, parents want to see it, the young people themselves. It's important we explain the risk to them. They might not see the risk assessment depending on their age, but we need to understand the risks they're taking part in and making sure everyone's got a responsibility. It makes sure that we are, if someone asks us why, what if anything has gone wrong, then if we've not said we've had a first aider, why we're doing one. And it also highlights to us what incidents are more dangerous than others, what more risk assessments do we need to think more about the risks are, and where is a priority for our first aider. So it was an interesting conversation about what to include in a risk assessment and why. So yeah, I think it was a useful time.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for sharing, and some really, really great points there as well. And hopefully, yeah, that has helped you kind of see the benefits of talking it over, doing it together with your section leaders, your other members of your team, and also kind of the benefits of like, if you are struggling with something, talking it through with somebody else can be a really great thing to do. And the great thing about Scouting is we've got so many people in your group, in your district, or even at the county that you can ask for help with. And I think if it is something that you're not sure what to do, or kind of get a certain way down and get stuck, just, yeah, please do reach out for help from somebody. And there will be somebody, I'm sure, that's done a similar thing before and can help. So if we move on to the next slide, please, we're just going to touch on how and where we store our risk assessments. So we did start a little bit of this earlier about how it's really important to have them somewhere that everybody who needs to get them can see them. So we don't want them to be tucked away in a drawer or a folder where nobody else has access to. We want them to be kind of somewhere that anyone in your team can get to them, and also it's easy to share them with parents, young leaders, anyone like that might want to see them or might need to see them. So earlier Gareth mentioned you could use Scout's Risk Assessment Manager to do that, or I mentioned OSM, which is Online Scout Manager, I forgot the name there. But you could also use things like Dropbox or Google Drive, and have like a collaborative stored folder there. And like you might have a system in place already, but if you don't, again, reach out to other groups in your district or in the county and see what they do and see what you could use and what would work for you, because different groups have different, I suppose, setups, don't they, and different people in their teams, and something that's going to be easy to use for everybody is ideal, I think. So we heard about Scouts RAM and OSM earlier. Does anybody else have any good ways that they store their risk assessments and that they where they keep them for everybody to access? Any other good examples? Oh, Renelle said, I set up a WhatsApp group purely for risk assessments in addition to the leaders WhatsApp group. That sounds like a good idea, because then people, they're not going to get lost in all the chat, are they? Then they're going to be, okay, I want to see the risk assessment, it's there, and for the other chat, I can go to that one. I like that idea. I've not heard of that one before.
Our 6 Dales Walk has 10 checkpoints, and there are 10 folders with 10 risk assessments in, so that each one is available for anybody that wants to read.
Oh, excellent. And then I suppose with that one, it's a really interesting case, because some of them don't have very good access to technology, do you? So in that case, you will need like printed risk assessments.
You won't be able to, would you?
No, yeah. So there's a good point, actually. So I've spoken here a lot about sharing it and online platforms, but if you are running an activity where you can't do it online, that's something to consider, that you'll need printed ones, but printed ones that everybody knows where to access them as well.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Anyone else got any ideas or not? If not, we can...
I had a question.
Yeah.
Risk assessments are a bit tedious. How formal do they need to be? So if you're can you put pictures on them? Because people would engage more with them, or they might be more fun to put together if you could put a picture, where it's like risk of burning. You could have some, I don't know, where they need to be, they are effect legal documents, but how formal do they need to be?
John, do you have anything to say about that? I'm not sure. I've not come across any with pictures on before, but I think as long as the text is written, I don't see why not. But John might have some more comments about that from your experience. Oh, you're on mute, John, sorry. It's caught everybody out today, don't worry.
Yeah, keeps catching me as well. I should learn, shouldn't I? Yeah, I think it's fine, is that as long as it doesn't mask the sort of true message of it, and use it as reminders. I know in some COVID risk assessments that I did at the very start of COVID, I had little icons for the 2 meter separations and the wash hand icons, and that sort of thing. Just sort of, it kept sort of driving the message home, and I think that sort of thing is great. If the sort of little cartoons, then perhaps you're sort of trivializing it. So it's getting a balance, really. But for some people, you know, the picture will mean an awful lot more than the words. And, you know, we are an inclusive organisation. And so, you know, if we have someone who's sort of struggling with the written word, as it were, then those little icons and pictures, in fact, can really supplement things. So, yeah, I think that's a great idea, Andrew. But not to overdo it, that's all.
Yeah, and not to lose like the import. I'd probably have images and text
Yes.
I wouldn't replace the text with the images.
Oh yeah.
But it could be really useful if there's something specific that's a bit of a strange bit of equipment that people might not have come across if they've not been in scouting before. It could be really helpful to be able to show them a picture of it or a photo.
For example, if you've got new volunteers and you're saying how you want to have a chopping area set out, then a picture is going to be far more valuable in making sure it's done safely. If you want to show, if we're sharing risk assessments throughout and we're wanting to show that leaders understand how scouts should be holding an axe or carrying an axe, then a picture is going to be far more useful than just the text alone. Because sometimes, just thinking what you said, Andrew, about the ambit, they are quite dry documents, and what we want is people to read them and to understand them and to follow them. And sometimes an aid memoir for images and pictures could make sure we actually get there's a greater compliance. So that's an interesting one. Thank you.
I think that's good, Gareth, as well. And you could actually use them as an appendix to the risk assessments. So rather than sort of cluttering up the main text of it, sort of make a reference to it. And then you can perhaps be a little bit more verbose, describing as well as pictures in the appendix. So yeah,
that's a good point, John.
Yeah, great idea.
Yeah, fab. Thank you for that, everybody. So now we've pretty much reached the end of what we wanted to talk about today. But before we do, we're just going to go on to the next slide. And I want to touch on other places where you can get more information, what's on the website, where to go to for support. So earlier you got to the risk assessments page, and that I think is it's got so much information on it, and it's really worth looking through and kind of exploring if it's something you want more information on. So it goes through the 5-step processes that we looked at earlier. There's the example risk assessments on there for a wide range of different activities. Actually, there's a good range of stuff on there, and also the templates and links to like the safety parts of the website as well. So anything else safety related you can get to from there. There's also videos. So I know that a lot of people would rather watch a video than read through loads and loads of text. So there's videos on there that HQ have created about how to do your risk assessments, which you might want to look through or signpost other members of your team onto who haven't been able to be here today. And then also a really helpful area that looks at like the responsibilities and the kind of definitions of things like training and like leader in charge. What does all that mean? That's all on that page as well. And then finally, if you've got any feedback that you'd like to give to Scouts about how we do our risk assessments, any updates that come through, right at the bottom of the page is like a little link with a feedback form. So if there's something that you feel quite strongly about or something you think we do really well or we could do better, there's a feedback form there, and they'll they really like hearing from people like you who kind of are doing the stuff on the ground day to day. It's really, really helpful to hear your feedback. So that's a place to give it. And there's also a frequently asked questions section, which is updated a lot, and all of this actually is kept really, really up to date, and as is the rest of the website, and there's constantly new things being added and kind of things to make it a bit more easier and easier to use as well. So I would recommend keep checking back and maybe bookmarking specific pages. If you find something that's really good, bookmarking it so you can get back there really easily. And also, as I said before, don't forget to reach out to other people in your districts. Like if you're a section leader, the ADC assistant district commissioners for your section, someone like that could help you with risk assessments. Maybe somebody at the county. Who would be the best person at the county to reach out to, John, if you were looking for help with risk assessments? You
put me on the spot there, Elizabeth.
John Smallwood, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to say really. Most people will be very helpful. So yeah, just whoever you know, just go for that one really. Somebody who you've got a good dialogue with already. Most people are quite approachable, and you know, in scouting, the thing that I've learnt over the years is that everybody wants everybody else to succeed, and so they're more than happy to help. So yeah, just shout out. Don't see county as this sort of people in ivory towers. They're not. They're just down-to-earth leaders doing the similar role to you. They're wanting the same outcome for young people to have a safe and happy, enjoyable time in scouting. So yeah, you'll get support wherever you ask for it. Obviously, info centre's quite good, but sometimes the sort of personal approach and the ones that you know are better. So yeah. Just give me a shout if I'm the one that appeals to you. Let's put it that way.
But yeah, just do reach out and ask people. If you do need any help, and people will be able to help, and people have done it all before as well. So that will be good to do. So yeah, there we go. We've reached the end of the session. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming along today, and thank you for taking part and your really great contributions you've given today. It's been a really good session, I think, and we've had a few technical glitches with the ideas boards, but I think we've got past that, and it was fine. So hopefully we've kind of like demystified risk assessments a little bit and shown you that they're not anything new. It's something we do every day, and they can be quite straightforward, if a little bit tedious, but hopefully we'll try and make them less tedious by keeping them up to date. So I suppose the more you review them, the less you'll have to write new ones. And I'm just going to share a link in the chat to a feedback form that I'd really appreciate it if you could fill it in, take a couple of minutes. It shouldn't take very long, just to let us know how you found it today. And it will help us shape any other workshops we do in the future, any further support that the county can give you. It's really helpful to know what you think. And I just like to, we've got to the end of the hour now. So if you want to go, or if you've got something on, that's fine. If anybody's got any questions, we can stay on for a little bit to answer any questions you've got. Or if not, feel free to go and enjoy your Saturday afternoon.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thanthis, Gareth.
Nothing to do with it.
Much appreciated, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Sorry, Elizabeth, nothing to do with this, but just to let you know, our advert went live about 5 minutes ago, so I had a ding to tell me, so fingers crossed.
Oh, fantastic, yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, let me stop the recording.